And thank you all for joining us. We are honored to have Scott Smallen as the special guest from WaterSavers. We are going to be talking about tips and tricks of your OptiFlow programming. And when I called you up and I asked you to be a special guest on this show, we came to this decision together. We were talking about all of the different options about what we could talk about, and you felt strongly about jumping back into OptiFlow, which is ground that we haven't covered in a while. I want to hear kind of why do you think that's important, and what is your experience so far?
Yeah, as more and more OptiFlow controllers are out there in the field, and I'm supporting OptiFlow controllers, I'm having customers that are either taking over existing OptiFlow programs, controllers, or they're installing OptiFlow for the first time. And when questions come up about how can I just need to get water down, that's kind of their focus is, I just got to make sure I get water down. I've got new plant material. So how can I get them up and running on OptiFlow as quick as possible, as painless as possible, so that they don't have to worry about that? And then it kind of buys us time to dive into more of the power tools of OptiFlow, but I just need to get them up and running quick.
Yeah, and I see that a lot. Like, I think that the default for your average contractor is skepticism about flow and skepticism about advanced features as a barrier to them getting their job done, rather than as a supplement to getting their job done, right? And so I think that this is a very important topic to show just how easy that it can be, just how OptiFlow can make it super simple to manage and to see everything. You don't have to dive into the super deep end of the pool, but again, we give you that option. But the default is to think that you have to have everything in line and everything in place and all of the planets line up just right to get OptiFlow to start to do its thing. And what Scott and I want to talk about today is how that's not at all true, right? How we can, even without a flow sensor, even with a flow sensor that you're working on, or, like without a fully functional flow system, OptiFlow can still be a benefit. We can still get it running. We can still get irrigation. So we want to kind of take OptiFlow as to the shallow end of the pool as we can possibly run it there. So let me walk you into that discussion real fast. So I'm going to bring back up the PowerPoint. I'm going to talk very generally about OptiFlow, and we're just going to kind of wade into the pool here. So the difference between OptiFlow and a standard Pro 3 controller is that with OptiFlow, we program in the hydraulic system rather than just the components themselves, right? We program in the main line so that we can manage it, so we can see what the main line is doing, and we can functionally see all of the information we need to see to manage that main line. The advantage that gives us is that we can share flow information. So in this example that you're seeing here, we've got a system that has one big fat main line and 4 controllers that are pulling off of it. And this is a great example of just about every kind of irrigation customer that I see out there has this type of irrigation system. Scott, can you, see, I caught you right mid-drink.
It always happens right when I'm taking a sip.
Can you tell me just an example of who might have a system with one big main line and multiple controllers pulling off of it?
Yeah, there's a lot of examples. It could be a shopping center where you've got controllers throughout the shopping center, but there's one point of connection. So I've got one controller that's hardwired to that flow sensor that's listening to it, but I need all of my controllers to be able to share that flow sensor in the cloud via OptiFlow. It could be at an HOA where they've got controllers throughout the complex, but then they've got one main line. So there's many scenarios, corporate campuses, lots of controllers sharing a main line.
Right. I wanted to go back to the HOA just as an example, because they're the biggest culprit of building on, right? They're the biggest culprit of
Yeah.
putting in an irrigation system and then, oh, I just want to add a park here, add an area over there. And that's where we get kind of all of these controllers just tacking on. And that is part of the beauty of OptiFlow. We can have commercial sites, we can have HOAs, we can have corporate campuses, we can have simple systems, we can have complex systems. And the OptiFlow architecture is designed to be easy enough that we can retrofit onto any of those. So the way that works is cloud-based flow management. In this example, we have this controller right here that listens to the flow sensor and master valve. But then because we're sharing all of that information in the cloud, we can have all of these member controllers, all of these other controllers listen to that flow sensor and be able to provide not only flow optimization, but station-based flow management, right? Where we can identify station leaks and station breaks and the kind of thing that water managers want to get to, because those are the kind of things that can cost you serious gallons. So OptiFlow allows us to manage flow on a complex system like this. And the way that it does it is pretty unique, pretty easy. All of the systems still operate. So you still get all of the beauty of the WeatherTRAK, weather-based irrigation, deciding what days we need to irrigate and all of that. Before irrigation, all of those controllers collect what needs to water and load that up into the cloud. And then, oh, I went too far. And then in the cloud, we create an optimized program that tells each controller exactly when it needs to fire. More specifically, each station, the minute and second it should start and the minute and second it should stop, to keep that main line flowing as much water through the main as we can, keep the system running at its capacity, and as a result, minimize the amount of time that it takes to manage a large or complex site. All right, and this is what that looks like. So here is the example. This is pulled straight from the demo that I'll show you later. But in this setup, we've got a main line that's set to 350 gallons per minute. And I've got two controllers that are pulling off of that. And what OptiFlow does is it balances the number of gallons per minute that your main line can provide against the number of the number of gallons that each station uses. So you can see here, the demonstration that we'll look at breaks irrigation down into 5-minute windows. So each one of these little gray bars is a 5-minute window. And we can see this highlighted gray bar somewhere in the 12 o'clock hour, actually at 12:45. We'll run 12 stations from those two controllers to push that 350 gallons per minute. So we can see how many gallons per minute each one of those station uses. And we know we want to balance that against the capacity of the main line. And we do this without all of the hardware that the historic irrigation systems that did this relied on, right? This is something that is new because of the power of the cloud. All we need to do is have the controllers and flow sensors in the right place. We don't have a heavy duty hardware solution that makes all of this happen. It all happens in the cloud. Scott, can you speak to that for a second?
Yeah, to really see the benefits of it, I like to go back to how things would have to be managed in the past, or if I had multiple controllers, I would have to say, oh, this controller is going to run Monday, Thursday. This controller is going to run Tuesday, Friday. This one's going to run Wednesday, Sunday. And to make adjustments, it quickly becomes just too much math to try and figure out yourself. But now it's all happening in the cloud. All that math is being done for you. It's figuring out, well, I can run this valve on this controller, this valve on that controller. And it's so helpful because our water windows in this industry have been getting bigger and bigger and bigger because of drip irrigation, high efficiency nozzles, rotors. Windows are getting bigger. But now with OptiFlow, I can shrink those windows down and completely use all of my water window to get that maximum amount of water down.
Right. And I'd say that in my perspective, it's moving in both directions, right? The need for more irrigation time is getting greater and greater, but because of drought and because of extenuating circumstances, we're actually being asked as irrigators to fit that irrigation into less and less time, right? And so while the hardware is going one way, the social pressure is going the other, and that's where OptiFlow steps in. So I think that it has a significant benefit to all of the managers out there. It's not just managing the hydraulics, but it's managing the water windows, and it's managing kind of all that goes into managing those systems and those sites. All right, so we're almost there, Scott, I promise. This is, so I went and pulled the information from the level 1, level 2, and level 3 OptiFlow training, which if you're managing OptiFlow, I recommend as highly as I can, as highly as somebody who wrote the trainings should recommend it. But it's all there. It's all free. It's all on demand. And just understanding kind of the structure of it all makes it all so much easier. But the third level, the programming, installation and programming training, we go into the 7 steps of success with OptiFlow training. So that's what I pulled here. And when Scott and I are talking, we're going to talk about how easy it becomes, but you still have to follow this diagram, right? You still have to get done the things that need to get done. You just don't have to get your PhD in irrigation to get this stuff into the system, but it still is required, right? We're still going to need to go in no matter what kind of OptiFlow system we were getting involved in. If we want it to be simple or complex, there are still benchmarks that we need to hit before that system will irrigate, will do what we want it to do. All right, so that is it. That is where we get into the tips and tricks conversation, Scott. And the tips and tricks conversation, we want to use an example where we make this as easy as possible. So I am going to, I've got the demo up now. I want you to walk us into kind of what we're going to be talking about, maybe some field experience on why we would need a simple version of OptiFlow.
Yeah. Many times when you're installing a new OptiFlow controller, many of my customers are also installing a flow sensor at the same time. And when they put the controller in, it may not necessarily be wired to that flow sensor yet, or they may haven't had time to learn all of the flow values, but they still want to irrigate right away. So learning some tips and some tricks will help us see how I can get irrigation down that very night. I install the OptiFlow controller, and maybe I haven't installed the flow sensor yet. I can still use OptiFlow to irrigate and using simple math. Or maybe that I do have the flow sensor in and it's wired and I've got 48 stations and I just haven't learned all of my flow yet. No worries. We're going to be able to put in values that's going to get irrigation down tonight.
And one thing that I think that is at the heart of this conversation is that OptiFlow, the feature of OptiFlow, doesn't actually rely on that flow sensor at all, right? We do have features that rely on that flow sensor, the measurement, the learn flow that Scott's talking about, all of the things that happen that check your hardware are relying on that learn flow rate and that flow sensor behaving the way that it should. However, OptiFlow isn't that. OptiFlow takes those values and does the math with them. And so as a result, it doesn't necessarily take a well dialed in flow sensor to get that done, right? And that's what we're really talking about is you don't have to have all of the flow sensor just buttoned up and dialed in. We can start on day one. We can make this as easy as possible, and then we can gradually move toward that more advanced flow monitoring that we really want to get to. That's where you want to be. You want those flow sensors working because that's what protects you out in the field. All right, so well, there we go. Sharing again. What I have here is the WeatherTRAK HOA, okay? So it's all set up to run. We can just show them very quickly kind of what we have here. This is, in fact, the system that I have on my wall next to me. It's in the WeatherTRAK studio here with me, and I manage this for the corporate account. So I use this as my OptiFlow demo, and in its natural state, it is exactly what we're talking about. This is a demo controller that has no flow sensor at all. So the dirty little secret is that I train on a controller that doesn't listen to flow at all. So everybody who has learned OptiFlow has learned in this basic setup. But what we see here is just from a high level, right? We see that this is a system that's optimized to 100 gallons a minute, and you can go through and look at what each individual flow rate is. If you go back to that 7 steps of flow programming, the number one thing that we have to do is establish a flow value for every station, okay? And that is important. That happens over here on the program page. And this is where the workaround really starts to show itself. Scott, you want to talk about what I see here in the flow sensor and then what I see here in the station flow?
Yeah, so you've got in your flow sensor here.
I've got it turned on.
Oh, you've got a flow 3 photodiode. It's a 3-inch. So you've got that information in there. Master valve's normally closed.
So let's say I'm installing and I go to test that flow sensor and I get no flow. This is something that can cost me hours, sometimes days, to try and figure out where that signal's getting lost, right? In the meantime, I have to lay down irrigation. I've got a new landscape that absolutely needs water. What do I do from there?
So the first thing you can do is turn your flow sensor off.
Okay.
And then.
So that is a great point. Let's do that first. Okay. So with OptiFlow, what we want to do to turn off the flow sensor belongs to the main line, right? Every point of connection belongs to the main line. So I go in here to my main line, I hit this plus button, and that means I want to edit the information for my flow or for my main line. And ooh, just kidding. That's, oh no, I want to edit. That's the gear, not the plus. The plus means I want to add to it. So I go in here, I hit edit main line, and down at the bottom of the main line, I see all of the points of connection that feed into that main line, right? So right here, I've got this POC1 that is feeding the main line. Anytime that this is turned on, it's active. So anytime I have this flow sensor on, it's the WeatherTRAK is looking for that flow sensor and going to be telling you what it's doing, right? And what we know is that it's broken, and we know we don't want to listen to it. So what we do is we come edit the main line, edit the points of connection, and all we got to do is turn this mode to off. Right here, I have on. If I turn it off and save that, then the WeatherTRAK will know I don't need to listen to that flow sensor. The information isn't correct, so it stops that from happening, right? So that is your first step. I'm going to toss it back to you, Scott.
Okay, excellent. So if we can go back where I can look at my station flow rates.
Okay, we go back to the program page. That's where all of the station information lives. So I go to Smart Irrigation, the program tab, and I expand the file called Station Flow, where we see all of the station flow rates.
So looking here, if I haven't learned flow yet, if I've already have user defined gallons per minute like we have here, I want to see what's my highest value that's on here. I say I got 50 gallons and I've got 65 gallons, knowing how much I'm going to run. I got 70 gallons. If my pressure allows me to run 2 valves at once, then I'm going to do the math and figure out what my mainline threshold is going to be at. And all of this can be done without the flow sensor being turned on. It's still just going to do the math for me.
Exactly right. So what you see here is I ran a learned flow test at one time back in the day, 2017, but no gallons per minute appeared. So that's because it's not hooked up to a flow sensor. And so what I did was, instead of using the learned flow rate, I went in and manually dialed in a flow rate for every station. So the OptiFlow needs a flow rate. It doesn't need a learned flow rate. You can manually define this and let the station use the manually defined flow rate as the number that it will use to create the optimized program.
And the customer, the end user, they can do this too. They can figure out what their estimated flow rate is, right? They could do a poor man's flow where they go to the meter, record the meter reading, run a valve for 5 minutes, go back, see what the meter reading is, and then divide the difference by 5. Or you can go to the manufacturer's information for your heads. What's the flow rate for each head? You can estimate it that way if you want to come up with something that's pretty accurate.
Another thing that I've done, Scott, is that to make it super easy, I have my field guys go and look at all the stations and judge, call them small, medium, or large, or low, medium, and high, or whatever it is, right? And first of all, I figure out kind of which ones are the smallest and the medium and the large. Then I figure out which the largest one of those of each of those groups is, and I try and run all 3 at the same time, right? That's the OptiFlow test. Can I run one of each at the same time? And so if I can run all of that without affecting the distribution uniformity, then I know kind of very quickly how I can shoehorn those in together. So let's go back.
I may steal that from you, Ben.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
It has worked a bunch of times. So let's talk about once you're here, what that looks like, right? I've currently got all of this manually programmed, but if I'm in a hurry, man, this is super easy. I go in here, and if I want to only run one station at a time, I am in dire straits. I want to figure out my flow sensor tomorrow, but I need to irrigate tonight, and it doesn't matter if it waters one station at a time. I go to OptiFlow and I say, I can run all of my stations at 10 gallons a minute, right? So I select all, I go to the bottom, I use this program, all of the stations together tool. I hit that preview changes that applies the 10 to every station that I selected, and then I save it. Right? If I was going to only run one station at a time, I set all of those stations to 10 gallons a minute. And then after that saves, I go back to my OptiFlow program and tell the OptiFlow program that I can only run 10 gallons a minute. And that lives right here on the main line, instead of the 100 gallons per minute that I have in there now. I go in and I say 10 gallons per minute. And this does what Scott's talking about, right? This is the most simple version. This is my main line has 10 gallons a minute. I've told the main line it only has 10 gallons a minute. I've told each station that it runs at 10 gallons a minute. So it's going to use that 10, it's going to use that math, and it's only going to run one station at a time, right? It's going to think that it's maxing the capacity with every station.
I think that's very empowering to know that for irrigation managers. And it also gives you a sense of comfort too, that I can get this up and running right away. I'm not going to get my flow alerts, but that's okay. My flow sensor either wasn't working correctly anyway, or I haven't had a chance to wire it, but I know I'm going to be able to get get water down and be safe and have my plant material protected. And if I know I can run 2 at a time, I could set that threshold at 20, and now I know, okay, I'm going to get 2 valves at the same time.
Perfect. So if I set that to 20, I could do it that way. Or if I go back to this is kind of the next level that I wanted to show you, right? The most simple is 10 gallons on the main line, 10 gallons on each station. But if I wanted to, I could go in and say, I've got all my large stations. I'm going to run those all at 5 gallons a minute, right? I know I've got 10 gallons per minute capacity. So I'm going to run all my large stations at 5. I'm going to run all of my medium stations at 3 and all of my small stations at 2. And so again, I've got this place where I can either run one of each, or I could be running as much as 5 of the small stations, right? That allows that OptiFlow to really do its job and to capture some of that time savings. It's just math. That's the easy step to take, right? That we're not using the actual flow information. OptiFlow is just doing the math in the cloud and deciding what can run.
And it's not a lot of math either. You're just really looking at those 2 values. What's the station flow rate, and then what's my mainline flow rate. So it's really simple.
Exactly right. And so just like with Pro 3, just like with LC, if you turn off that flow sensor, it turns off in a different place because it's not attached to the main line. But as soon as we turn off the flow sensor, the controller knows not to look for it. It will stop creating the station-based flow alerts or the measured flow alerts that you want, because that's why you have a flow sensor, but they're not bulletproof. They break, they take time to get dialed in. So it really does take some doing to get that flow sensor where it needs to be. And the message for today is that OptiFlow doesn't depend on that flow sensor so much as just having flow information that it can do the math with. Without, if it isn't programmed at all, it's not going to run, right? We go back to, this has to be done. It just doesn't have to be deep end, super intricate or super detailed or hard to do. It can be something that you can get done on day one and take it in the process, take the tree whichever way it falls.
And that's nice too. I'm just thinking of other examples where I've had customers install, in June, in July, and they don't have to worry about, oh, I'm going to have alerts. Is it going to interrupt my irrigation? No, we're going to make sure that we get water down here in the heat of summer, and we're going to be able to dial in that flow sensor when you have time to do it. If you don't have time right now, don't worry. We're still going to get water down, and your plant material is going to be protected.
All right, Scott, I have a question for you, the standard WeatherTRAK question, but I got a question from Angel coming in that we want to take on. So we're going to run a few seconds long here, but Angel asks, is there an option where you can select how many max stations can run at once? And the answer is a little bit more convoluted than you might hope. The answer is only by program. Okay, so if you want to limit the number of stations a program will run, I'll show you how to do that. If you want to go beyond that, you're going to have to use the start times and water windows to make sure we're isolating programs where they live and we're not running multiple programs. But if I go back to my OptiFlow tab and to my optimize page here, I can go in, oh, just kidding, not my optimize page, my configure page. Each station has a gear on it, or each program has a gear on it. So I can go into each program, and on that gear, I drill in and it says max simultaneous stations, right? And so that is for this program when it's running. If I can only let one station on this program run at once, I set this to 1, and that will only turn on 1 valve at a time in this program. So we can limit it. inside the program. And then what you have to be aware of is here, I've got all of my programs. And so if I look at my optimized page, I can see that they all have different start times and water windows. I want to be sure that, pardon me, that program doesn't share time, because if multiple programs start at that time, I'll be running maybe only one per program, but the main line will be running 2 at once, or multiple at once. So hopefully that answers your question. All right, Scott, I'm coming back to you. That is our only question. So do you have any final thoughts on tips and tricks on OptiFlow?
Yeah, I was going to mention too that I do have customers that are, and I were super excited when the 200 station came out, and it's a game changer for us. There's some systems out there that we want to retrofit, and they were 130, 140. But when you go to the 200 station H2O 2-wire platform now, it will be OptiFlow. So that's another area where we can use these tips and tricks to make sure that when it's a 2-wire installation, that my customer knows there is going to be that additional layer of doing some OptiFlow programming. But don't be worried. We can still, it's going to be simple math. And whether we have a flow sensor or not, we're going to be able to, again, irrigate quickly.
Right. And right out of the box, the only controller that right out of the box comes in that OptiFlow mode, in that version 8 firmware, is that 200 station H2O 2-wire. The 48 station and 96 station come in setup mode, where you don't have to worry about this. It's still part of the process, but out of the box, that 200 station requires this OptiFlow setup to get everything running the way you want it to. And it's important, because if you're managing 200 stations, you basically need OptiFlow to get all of that irrigation done. All right, Scott. So I haven't seen any other questions come in. Thank you for the question. Scott, this is, I believe, your 3rd time as the special guest.
I think it's my 2nd time, but
okay.
Maybe it feels like 3 for you, but
I was looking back through and I was like, wait a minute, is it his 2nd or his 3rd? So the 2nd time guests get, so first time guests always get asked, what does WeatherTRAK save you? Mm-hmm. The 2nd time guests get the question, what is your favorite WeatherTRAK feature?
Does the mobile app count as a feature?
That's a lot of features.
Then I would say
something on the mobile app that you use.
Then I would say one of the then if it's not going to be the mobile app, because that's just, to me, is I love the mobile app. I love the mobile app. I had a great story yesterday working with a contractor, and once they figured out what the mobile app meant, you could see the light bulb go off on their head, like, oh, I'm going to save so much time. But if it's my favorite feature, it's going to have to be station grouping, and controller grouping will probably be my favorite. It's just so powerful, where instead of treating each station individually, I'm able to group many stations across different controllers and treat them like one station. And I can group them by plant material. It's a fantastic feature, and it's a real power move.
Yeah, you're funny, Scott, because you went from one end of the spectrum to the other, right? You went, and I just want to bring up the station grouping, show you where it lives. If you are wondering where that station grouping, you're seeing my screen, right, Scott?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're wondering where station grouping lives, we have done full episodes on it in the past, but if you come here to the Smart Irrigation tab in the controllers page, we can come over here and create a station group. First, you select which controllers, then you'll select which stations you want in the group, and you can enable a similar change to all of the stations inside the group. So it's funny that you went from mobile app, which is to me like as granular, as one at a time, as basic as it gets, right? That mobile app is turn it on, let me look at it. Like, I want to detail this one station,
right,
to the other end, which is using WeatherTRAK, we can incorporate multiple stations, multiple controllers, multiple sites, right? We can do all of that so easily that it can save you time that way.
There's a lot of flexibility. You can go granular or you can go global.
Exactly. So you are an expert at giving those examples. So I appreciate you, Scott. Let me jump what I have. Coming up next week, before I ask you your question, I've got, where'd it go? Got it hiding over here. Back to you. We were going to talk a little bit about dropped, but we have run out of time for that. So I'll do that next week. The last 5 episodes of the year are going to be the dropped Tournament of Champions. And we will have Scott Smallen returning on Distributor Day to participate in our Tournament of Champions. Looking forward to that. But in the meantime, next week, we will have my friend Brad Schuster from here in the Denver area. Brad is very experienced in WeatherTRAK, and when he talks to HOAs, he talks about what to expect, and it's not all roses. It really is water conservation, and there's costs to it. So we'll talk about the benefits and the costs that come along with it, what HOAs can expect when they start to implement water management and really kind of watch every drop, what they should expect from their contractors and from their sites in that first year, what is fair to kind of set up as the expectations. So I think that'll be a great conversation. In the meantime, back to you, Scott Smallen. Let's finish off. You have anything you want to close out saying?
No, I think we covered some really important topics. And I think for those that are using OptiFlow, the example you gave of how you can just set everything at 10, set my limit at 10, I think that's super, super powerful for water managers and should give them a sense of comfort and take anything scary away from OptiFlow, that it's not scary. It's really easy. It's really simple. And it's not going to be, like you said, it's not going to be a barrier to doing what I need to do on the landscape.
That's awesome. Great perspective from a great water manager. So thank you all very much for tuning in. We will see you next week. Scott, thank you so much for making time.
Thank you.